Hello, I'm glad to see you again today. My name is Brian Martin, and today is March 22nd, 2020, and it is the fourth Sunday of Lent. And most Sundays, I take time out to review the gospel lesson that's been assigned to this particular Sunday. It is the season of Lent, and it is a special time of the year, perhaps the most special time of the year for Christians, as we pause and reflect and prepare for the story of Jesus' death and his resurrection. These days give us an opportunity to examine our hearts and our minds. And my Lenten discipline for this particular season is to eliminate 100% of the negative thinking in my life. And that's an awesome challenge, and I hope that you've accepted it as well. But let's get right into the gospel lesson. It's a lengthy lesson today. It's John chapter 9, and it's the entire chapter. It records the incident where Jesus heals a blind man, and then there's the repercussions of this event. Now, a lot of events that Jesus participates in are limited in their presentation in the gospel lesson, in the gospel itself. They take up a paragraph or two, it goes on to another story, it goes on to another story, and there might be 3 or 4 stories in one chapter. This entire chapter is devoted to this one incident, which gives me an idea about how important it is for the writer and how important the message is for the listener. Today, as always, I'm asking you to take a look at this from Jesus' perspective and ask yourself this question: what was Jesus thinking? And then let that thought process inform your own thinking about your world. Let's begin. As he walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Now that is a really provocative statement, and it reveals so much about what was the thinking, the contemporary thinking of people in that particular time. The question was, who sinned, this man or his parents? In other words, the consequence for this type of ailment, or maybe perhaps any ailment, might be seen, these might be seen as incidents where somebody did something wrong, they sinned, and as a result of that, they were punished, or these things came upon them. And as you know, this is very archaic thinking. In our world today, there are so many unknown variables, so many unknown factors that are involved, that sometimes it's just impossible to say what were the sequence of events that led to a particular problem. People still do this today. It wasn't too long ago where it was thought that the best thing to do for Down syndrome children was to let them die before they got older, because they wouldn't have any kind of value or any quality of life whatsoever. And of course, that's just totally not true. But that was the prevailing thought until just a few years ago, a few decades ago. So people's thinking needs to be challenged about all kinds of things. So let's take a look at this some more. Jesus answered, "Neither this man or his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him." Now that's an interesting statement also. He was born this way so that God's works might be revealed in him. That's a really interesting statement. I want to think hard about that. And so I have come to a conclusion about what that really means for me, and I hope that you might be influenced by my thinking as well. I'll get to that in just a few minutes. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. I guess in the age of coronavirus, this really strikes home, doesn't it? Because we can't work. we're stuck, we're quarantined, can't do what we were supposed to be doing. So what does that mean that we should be doing? That's a good question. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. That's a beautiful statement. And I want to make that my statement also. And I'm hoping that you will too. Let me read the statement again. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. See, I don't think that this is a statement that just applies to one man, Jesus. I think this is a statement that applies to every human being who is born. We are born to bring light into the world. And the way that we do that is by loving people. When we love people, when we help people, we're loving them. It is what people can do to achieve absolute meaning and purpose in their life, is to decide, not only to decide, but to control their thinking so that everything that they do, it revolves around the idea of loving people. The story goes on. When he said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with his saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes. I don't think he wore gloves when he was doing that either. The story goes on, saying to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Then he went and he washed and he came back able to see. What's very interesting and personal to me is that I've been to that pool a few years back, decades back now, when we were in Israel. They had excavated and they found the pool of Siloam, and we actually got to go there, although it was all fenced off. And somebody let us in, and we got to go and to be around that pool and to watch and to observe it. It was fascinating. Not a large pool by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a place where people would go and hope that they might be healed. And here is a particular case when a man went to this pool, washed, and was healed. And then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" And some were saying, "It is he." And others were saying, "No, but it must be someone like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." But they kept asking him, "Then how are your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and he said to me, 'Go wash, go to the Siloam and wash.' Then I went and I washed and I received my sight." And they said to him, "Where is he now?" And he said, "I do not know." It's interesting that the consequence of this good action on Jesus' part led to a struggle for the man's identity. Isn't that the man who was the beggar? People understood and knew him as the beggar, the blind beggar. That was his identity. I am the blind beggar. Imagine that. Imagine that. And now he's changed, and now he has sight and he can see. That changes his entire identity and who he is in the world. I think, as we're going to see here in just a moment, there's a spiritual message here that when we open our eyes, that is, we control our thoughts. When we open our eyes and we control our thoughts, then our identity changes. Not only how we see the world change, how we think about the world changes, and we become better able to be the kind of people that we are supposed to be. People who bring light into the world as long as they are in the world. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. The Pharisees were the ruling religious party in that particular culture. Now, it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Okay, well now, you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath day, but Jesus, he made mud and he put it on the man's eyes. He actually healed him, and this was not a kosher thing to do. The Pharisees also began to ask him how he'd received his sight. And he said to them, he put mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I see. And some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath." So the culture was deciding whether a person was from God or not by how well they observed the culture's rules. The culture's rules trumped every other rule. There could be no other rules, just what the culture said. And the culture was guarded by these men. There were no women. It was guarded by these men who decided what was of God and what is not of God. That is a dangerous worldview. But others said, how can a man who is a sinner perform such signs? And they were divided. And so they said again to the blind man, what do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened. And he said, he is a prophet. That was the greatest thing that he could think of about a person who might do things like this. The Jews did not believe that he'd been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, is this your son who you say was born blind? All right, so, this is really becoming quite a spectacle, and they're chasing after the, quote, truth, right? Okay, so where's Jesus while all this is going on? Jesus has done what he was supposed to do. He brought light to one who was in darkness, and now he's waiting, and he's going to see what's going to be happening as a result or as a consequence of his action of bringing light into darkness. How then does he see now? His parents answered, we know that this is our son and that he was born blind. But we do not know how it is that he now sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews. And for the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. All right, so there's consequences for believing a different way than what is dictated by the prevailing culture. Got it? This is really powerful stuff, and it informs our life because the culture, our contemporary cultures, dictates what's right and what's wrong. And not only that, it judges you and your actions by how well you conform to the culture's dictates. Now, it doesn't allow room for another dictate. It doesn't allow room for another culture to come in and say, this is what is really the truth. That is scary. So for a second time, they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him, give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered, I do not know whether he is a sinner. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see. And they said to him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And he answered them, I've told you already, and you wouldn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples? So it became a power struggle. Then they reviled him, saying, you are his disciples, but we are disciples of Moses. Isn't that interesting? Nothing in here talks about the beauty and the virtue of helping other people. What's most important is not helping other people, not loving other people, but making sure that your life conforms to the prevailing culture. That is interesting to me. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we don't know where he comes from. The man answered, here's an astonishing thing. You don't know where it comes from, and yet he opens my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he does listen to those who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it ever been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, You were born entirely in sins, and you're trying to teach us. And they drove him out. Now, there's another interesting teaching that the Pharisees held, which is proven wrong by the circumstances and by what Jesus did. You were born entirely in sins, and you are trying to teach us. Here's another truth that these cultures continue to prevail upon people today. Another view is that you are a living miracle. The odds of you being born into the world are extremely, extremely small. They are of astronomical proportions. And yet you live. Somehow or another, this green planet came into an existence. Somehow or another, your ancestors came into existence. Somehow or another, they were able to survive through all kinds of difficult and things, wars and pestilence and wild animals and all kinds of things. They were able to survive long enough to pass their DNA down through the chain of history to the point that where you came. Somehow or another, your parents came together and met, and as a result of a brief encounter, your life came into an existence. If that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. You are a living miracle. That is the truth about your life. Now, somebody might say, but there's 8 billion of us on the planet. How can that be a miracle that there are so many individuals? And all I can say to that is, what a greater miracle is that? That is a phenomenal, astounding miracle of astronomical proportions. Now, if you were to believe that way about yourself and other people, do you think that would change the way that you think about them? Do you think that maybe one of the things that Jesus wanted to do here was to show that the individual is valuable and that he or she is worth good things happening to them and not being judged or dismissed because they have some kind of a defect or deformity, whether it's a physical, a mental, or a social deformity? No, Jesus does not want you to think like that. He wants you to think that people are freaking miracles of astronomical proportions who have gifts and skills and talents and tools of themselves so that as long as it is light, they can bring light into the world. The story continues. Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "Who is he, sir? Tell me so that I may believe in him." And Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and is the one speaking with you, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped Jesus. Jesus said, "I came in the world for judgment so that those who do not see may see, and for those who do see may become blind." Well, that's an interesting statement. Do you think Jesus wanted them to become blind? Well, they think that they see, but in reality, they're blind. And what they really need is their eyes opened to a different way of thinking about themselves and the world. It's the thinking of love. And the story continues. Some of the Pharisees near him heard this, and they said to him, "Surely we are not blind, are we?" And Jesus said to them, "If you were, you would not have sin. But now that you say we see, your sin remains." As long as they continue to hold the line of the prevailing culture and do not embrace the line of love, then they are not seeing. And in their own language and in their own colloquial way of speaking to each other, they would say that that is sin. Now that's interesting to me. That's a fabulous story, and I love it, love it, love it, love it. Jesus was thinking that he was the one who was going to bring light into the world as long as he is with them. That is what I want you to embrace for yourself. And then Jesus challenged their thinking, their prevailing culture, and he challenged it to the highest level, to the very seat of authority. And he challenged them, and they would not change. But that didn't stop him. He continued to engage them and he challenged them. And that's what we need to do. Challenge the prevailing culture by seeing ourselves as freaking amazing miracles of astronomical proportions who have gifts and skills and talents and tools that we should use as long as it is still light, as long as we possibly can. And we have to take this out and love people in every situation we possibly can and help to change the world one by one. So in the days of the coronavirus, when everybody is shut in, what can we do? Man, I'm seeing some really great things happening. I'm seeing people organize Facebook gatherings. I'm seeing actors and actresses doing acting online and reaching more and more people. And I'm seeing so much love being expressed during this time. It's phenomenal. It's just really beautiful. And that's the way I see it. Others are seeing it otherwise. They're feeling shut in, they're feeling cut off, they're feeling hopeless. They're feeling like they're not going to have enough of anything. And it's just awful, bad, damaging. There's more opportunity now in the world than there ever has been. And we who can see the light of the necessity of love, it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we're on the front lines of providing help to people who need help during this time. Frankly, the only thing that the world needs to survive through this difficult time is you and me loving and helping other people. And as we do, the world will be made better. Take advantage of this time. Bone up on your loving. Change your thinking. See the opportunity. Respond with love. Use your gift. Use your skill. Use your talent and bring light into the world as long as we still can. God bless you. I love you. Whoops, you disappeared on me. Hold on, don't go away. There you are. God bless you. I love you. My name is Brian Martin. Please leave a comment, and I look forward to seeing you soon, perhaps next week, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise.